The old wall clock in the modest farmhouse had a way of calling attention to itself, not with volume, but with hesitation. Its minute hand would tremble for the briefest second before taking a single, reluctant step forward. Most people would never notice a detail so small, but the man who lived there noticed. He noticed every morning, at the same exact hour, as if the clock were trying to warn him of something he already feared. He didn't look at that clock to check the time. He looked at it to remind himself that time was moving, even when the people he loved weren't. Down the narrow hallway, behind a door that almost never closed properly, his son was still asleep, or hiding behind sleep. The soft morning light stretched across the cluttered room, revealing jeans tossed over a chair, notebooks with the first pages empty, and a pair of dusty boots that looked almost untouched. There was a smell too, the scent of long afternoons wasted, of wood that hadn't seen purpose in a while, of quiet resignation. Outside, their small American town was waking up. You could hear the rumble of an old pickup starting near the neighbor's barn, the clang of metal at the workshop down the road, and the faint whistle of a train passing miles away. A gentle chaos, ordinary, honest. A reminder that everyone had somewhere to be, something to do, some hour of the day with their name on it. Everyone except the boy. The father stood in the doorway of his son's room, resting one shoulder against the frame. He watched the slow rise and fall of the boy's chest. His expression carried a heaviness that couldn't be mistaken for anger. It was something far deeper, the kind of sorrow that grows quietly over the years, built from memories you wish you could rewrite and mistakes you don't want to see repeated in the people you love most. He knew his son wasn't lazy by nature. There was no malice, no rebellion in the boy's drifting, just absence, a kind of inward fog, a hollow he didn't speak about, perhaps didn't even know how to. The wandering through town without purpose, the long stretches of time sitting by the old baseball field doing nothing, the way he drifted behind conversations like a shadow. It wasn't irresponsibility, it was escape, and that frightened the father more than the mess, more than the wasted days, more than the silence at dinner. Because he recognized that kind of escape. He had lived it. He knew exactly where it could lead. He'd once been that boy, drifting through life with a quiet conviction that tomorrow would fix everything tomorrow never fixed. And he carried scars from that time, scars no one ever asked about, scars that still pulsed whenever he heard the clock hesitate. He didn't want that future for his son. He couldn't stand the thought of watching him disappear into the same slow, consuming darkness. That morning, as the clock stuttered before taking its next reluctant step forward, the father felt something inside him shift. He straightened. He exhaled. He understood with painful clarity that he could no longer stay on the sidelines of his son's life. Not today. Not again. Something had to change. And whatever that was, it would have to begin now. Before we go on, if this story has already stirred something in you, hit that subscribe button. There's a lot ahead, and every chapter gets deeper. The sun had barely risen when the father stepped into his son's room without knocking. The boy was sitting on the edge of the bed, half awake, his hair still messy from sleep. He looked up surprised. His father never entered like that. Not quietly, not intentionally. Something was different. The man walked in holding a small object wrapped in an old handkerchief, the same faded cloth he used years ago at the workshop where he once repaired farm tools. The smell of metal and oil still clung to it, even after all this time. Without a word, he set the bundle on the wooden table near the bed. His movements were slow, deliberate, the kind of slowness that comes when a person is trying to hold their emotions together. The boy watched as his father unfolded the cloth. Inside it lay a pocket watch, old, heavy. Its silver finish was scratched in places, worn thin in others. It looked like something that had survived decades of being passed from hand to hand, life to life. The ticking was faint, almost shy, but steady. The son frowned. He had never seen it before. The father finally spoke, his voice steady, but carrying a weight the boy hadn't heard before. "I need you to take this into town," he said. "Ask people how much they think it's worth." The boy blinked, confused. "Why? What is this about?" But his father didn't answer. He simply stepped aside, giving the boy space to choose, though the urgency in his eyes made it clear this wasn't really a choice. The boy took the watch. It was colder than he expected. He could feel every scratch beneath his fingertips, each one like a memory he didn't know yet. He slipped on his boots and stepped outside. The town was already stirring. A school bus rumbled down the main road. A couple of farmers stood outside the feed store, coffee cups steaming in their hands. The American morning had a familiar rhythm, ordinary, predictable, comforting. Yet nothing felt ordinary to him. He walked into the heart of town, approaching people he'd known since childhood. A retired veteran sitting on a bench examined the watch and said, "Maybe $50. A woman behind the bakery counter guessed 100. A mechanic suggested it wasn't worth repairing. A teenager laughed and shrugged. Every answer was different, every opinion scattered, and with each inconsistent price, an uneasiness grew inside him. None of them agreed. None of them saw anything special. Why would his father send him out for this? He wandered farther, past the diner, across the small park where children played around rusty swings, and toward the older part of town where the storefronts had begun to fade with time. The air seemed quieter there, the voices softer, the world slower. His feet carried him to a narrow alley he rarely noticed. At the end of it stood a small watch repair shop, the kind of place people forget exists until they desperately need it. A bell chimed above his head as he entered. Inside, an elderly man sat hunched over a magnifying lens, working meticulously on a broken wristwatch. The shop smelled of dust, brass, and patience. Without looking up, the old man said, "Give me a moment." The boy waited, and for the first time that morning, he felt the weight of the silence, as if the shop itself were listening. Finally, the old man lifted his head. His eyes were sharp, observant. "What brings you here?" he asked. The boy held out the pocket watch. "I'm supposed to ask people how much it's worth." The old man didn't take it immediately. He studied the boy's face first, as if the answer depended not just on the object, but on the hands holding it. Then, gently, he took the watch. He pressed it to his ear. He examined the dents. He traced the worn engraving on the back. When he finally spoke, his tone was softer, more careful. "People will give you a price for the metal," he said. "But that's not the question you should be asking." The boy swallowed. "Then what is?" The old man placed the watch back into his hands. "Ask yourself what kind of time was lost before this came to you." A chill ran through the boy's spine. He didn't fully understand, but something inside him shifted. A realization, a discomfort, a beginning. He stepped back into the daylight, holding the watch tighter than before. His world had been cracked open, just enough for the truth to start seeping through. The boy left the watch shop feeling as if he were stepping into a world tilted slightly off-axis. The sunlight felt harsher, the sound sharper, and the ordinary buzz of the small town now carried an edge, like everything around him knew something he didn't. He walked without a plan, the pocket watch warm now from his grip. Each tick seemed louder than before, echoing against the walls inside his chest. It wasn't just a watch anymore. It felt like a message, a warning, a question. But he still didn't know what any of it meant. He drifted toward the far end of town, past the diner where the waitresses recognized every regular by name, past the Little League field where dusty baseballs forever sat forgotten in the grass, and toward an old walking trail that locals rarely used. The path was quiet, lined with pine trees that swayed gently in the wind, their needles whispering like unseen voices. He sat on a half-rotted bench and just breathed. For the first time in a long while, he felt the weight of his own life settle onto his shoulders. Not the weight of others' expectations, not the pressure of what he should be doing, but the weight of time, his time, slipping through his fingers without him noticing. A memory surfaced, uninvited. He remembered being 10 years old, sitting on the porch with his father on a late summer evening. His dad had told him something then, something soft, almost like a secret. "Time's a strange thing, son. It doesn't shout. It disappears quietly." At the time, he didn't understand it. Now, the words felt like a bruise being pressed. A sudden gust of wind made the leaves rustle, snapping him back. He stood up, unsure of where to go next. But his feet carried him toward the small riverside bridge on the edge of town, a place where teenagers used to meet at night, where couples sometimes carved initials into the railing, where life had happened all around him while he stood on the sidelines. There, leaning on the wooden rail, he saw Mr. Holloway, one of the older men in the community, someone known for keeping to himself. His face was carved by years of outdoor work and the kind of silence that comes from losing more than he spoke about. The boy hesitated, then approached. "Morning," he said quietly. Mr. Holloway glanced at the watch in his hand. "Pretty old piece you've got there." The boy nodded. "People can't agree on what it's worth." The older man let out a low breath, almost a laugh, almost a sigh. "Things don't lose value because people stop seeing it," he said. "Sometimes people just forget how to look." The boy froze. The words struck deeper than he expected. Mr. Holloway added, "The question isn't what it's worth. It's what it meant to someone." The boy swallowed hard. Everyone was saying different things, but somehow all pointing to the same unseen truth he hadn't uncovered yet. As he walked away, he felt a pressure building in his chest, a mix of fear, curiosity, and something that felt strangely like grief. For what he didn't know. Maybe for lost time. Maybe for things he never asked his father. Maybe for the version of himself he'd become without really choosing. The sun was beginning to dip when he made his way back toward town. Shadows stretched long across the pavement. The day felt older, and so did he. Near the general store, a group of kids were laughing loudly, chasing each other in circles. One of them bumped into him by accident, then froze, staring at the old watch in his hand. "Whoa," the kid whispered. "Looks like something important." The boy almost said it is. But the truth was he didn't know yet. He only knew that something inside him had shifted, the beginning of an awakening, the start of a truth he couldn't unfeel. By the time he reached the road that led back home, the sky was washed in pink and gold. He stopped for a moment, gripping the watch tightly, letting the wind brush against his face. He wasn't ready for answers yet, but he was no longer running from the questions. And for someone who had spent so long lost in his own fog, that was already a kind of change. And you, what would you be feeling in his place? Tell me in the comments. I'd really like to hear your thoughts. The house was unusually still when the boy stepped through the front door. Not quiet, still. The kind of stillness that settles in right before something breaks. He held the pocket watch tightly in his hand, its ticking suddenly too loud, too alive, as if reacting to the storm churning inside him. His father sat at the kitchen table, elbows resting on the wood, hands folded in front of him. He didn't look up immediately. The clock on the wall ticked with its familiar hesitation, each second stretching into the next like an echo from a distant past. The boy placed the pocket watch on the table. A soft metallic sound cut through the air. The father lifted his gaze. Neither spoke. The silence between them grew thick, not empty this time, but full of everything they had avoided for years. Finally, the boy swallowed hard. "I asked everyone," he said. "No one agrees on what it's worth." The father exhaled slowly, as if those words pulled something heavy from inside him. "That's because," he said, "they weren't the ones meant to answer." The boy stiffened. He waited. He didn't know whether he was angry, scared, or simply bracing. The father reached for the pocket watch, running his thumb along the scratches, as if reading a story engraved in the metal. "This watch wasn't mine," he began quietly. The boy froze. "It belonged to my father," the man continued. "Your grandfather." The boy stared, stunned. The room suddenly felt too small. "We didn't have much growing up," the father said. "But he gave me this one day, told me to hold on to it, said it would remind me that time doesn't come back once you let it slip." He paused, and for the first time, his voice wavered. "But I didn't listen." The boy's breath caught in his throat. "I wasted years," the father whispered. "Years I can't explain. Years I pretended didn't matter. And when I finally realized what I'd lost, he was gone." A crack formed inside the boy, the kind that doesn't make noise, but hurts as if it did. His father looked directly at him then, eyes heavy with regret. "When I look at you," he said, "I see the same look I had at your age. The drifting, the emptiness. the waiting for something to change without doing anything to change it. The boy felt his chest tighten. "I can't lose you to that same darkness," the father said. "I won't." Silence fell again, but this time it pulsed with raw truth. The boy looked at the watch lying between them. It suddenly felt heavier than ever, not because of its metal, but because of everything it carried. The weight of a man who had wasted his own time, the weight of a grandfather he barely remembered, the weight of generations of seconds that slipped away before anyone could hold onto them. He felt something inside him crumble, and something else rise. A shiver traveled up his spine. A realization. A rupture. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. The father blinked hard, a tear gathering in the corner of his eye. "Because I didn't want you to see what I had been," he answered. "I hoped you'd find your way, without knowing how badly I'd failed." The boy lowered his head, the truth settling like a stone in his stomach. The clock on the wall ticked. Once, twice, slow, heavy, irreversible. It struck him all at once. The wasted mornings, the empty days, the years he let slip because he thought time would always wait. But it never had, and it never would. He felt the sting of tears in his eyes, but he didn't look away. The boy reached for the watch, held it against his chest, and something inside him, something long asleep, finally woke. There was a before, and now there was an after. Nothing would ever be the same. If this moment hit you as deeply as it hit him, tap the like button now. It tells us you're feeling this journey too. The kitchen felt different after the truth settled between them. Not lighter, just honest. Honesty has weight, but it's a weight you can finally breathe under. The boy sat there for a long moment, hands curled around the pocket watch, as if he were afraid it might disappear. His eyes were unfocused, drifting somewhere between the past he never knew and the future he suddenly wasn't ready to face. His father stayed close, but not too close. He didn't push, didn't fill the silence. He simply remained, a steady presence, as if he finally understood that sometimes the greatest act of love is staying still so the other person can find their footing. Eventually, the boy stood, not abruptly, not dramatically. He just rose, like someone relearning how to inhabit their own body. He walked to the back door and stepped outside. The late afternoon light stretched over the fields, painting everything in soft gold. The air had cooled, carrying the faint scented hay and the distant hum of cicadas. He didn't walk far, just to the edge of the porch, where the wooden boards were warm from the sun. He sank down onto the top step and let the watch rest in his palms. It looked almost fragile now, not because it might break, but because he finally understood what it represented. A legacy, a warning, a second chance handed down through 3 generations. The boy let out a slow breath. For the first time in a long while, he felt something other than numbness. Something sharp, something real. Not happiness, not sorrow, but awareness. The awareness of everything he had been ignoring. After some time, his father came outside too. He didn't sit beside him. Instead, he stood a few feet away, leaning on the railing, giving the boy space while still letting him know he wasn't alone. "You don't have to say anything right now," the father murmured. The boy didn't respond, but he turned the watch over in his hands, running his thumb across the worn engraving on the back. It was faded, but still visible. Initials he now knew belonged to a man he would never meet. A grandfather who had tried to save his son. A father who was trying to save his. A sound caught the boy's attention. The distant whistle of a train passing through town. He remembered how he used to sit by the tracks as a kid, imagining hopping on and disappearing somewhere far away. Somewhere easy. Somewhere where time didn't matter. He realized now that running wouldn't have saved him. It would have buried him deeper. Eventually, he stood again and walked back inside. His father followed quietly, unsure, cautious, like approaching a door that might lead anywhere. Inside, the boy placed the watch gently onto the table. He paused. Then he looked at his father, really looked at him, as if seeing not just the man he knew, but the young man his father once was. The one who had made mistakes, who had regrets, who lost things he couldn't get back. The boy spoke softly. His voice cracked once. "I don't want to waste any more of it." His father blinked. No smile. No words. Just tears he tried to hide by looking away. The boy didn't say anything else. He didn't make promises. He didn't define what change would look like. But he reached for a dish towel on the counter and helped dry the plates still sitting in the rack. A small gesture, almost invisible, and yet it meant everything. It was motion. It was intention. It was the first step of someone stepping back into their own life. They worked side by side in quiet harmony, the clock ticking in the background, not ominous anymore, but alive. There was still pain to unpack, still conversations to have, still pieces to rebuild. But for now, this was enough. Presence was enough. Beginning was enough. If this moment touched you, truly touched you, you can support this story with a super thanks, or simply subscribe if you haven't yet. Your support helps us keep creating moments like these. The following days unfolded with a kind of quiet the boy had never noticed before, not the emptiness he used to float in, but a calm that came from finally facing something real. The house didn't feel heavier or lighter. It simply felt true, as if the walls had been holding their breath for years and were finally letting it out. Every morning, he woke before the sun, not because anyone asked him to, and not because he had a plan carved out in his mind. He just felt pulled to be present, to begin, to stand somewhere other than the drifting fog he used to live in. Sometimes he stepped out onto the porch and watched the fields catch the first traces of dawn. Other times he sat at the kitchen table with a pocket watch resting in front of him, listening to its soft ticking as if it were guiding him gently forward. He wasn't suddenly transformed. He still felt lost some mornings, still felt afraid of wasting time, still carried questions he didn't know how to answer. But the difference now was simple and enormous. He wasn't ignoring life anymore, and that was enough to shift everything. His father, though careful, seemed to breathe easier around him. He moved with a gentler presence, as if afraid to disrupt the delicate bridge forming between them. Sometimes, when the boy thought he wasn't looking, his father would pause in the doorway and just watch him, as if making sure the moment wasn't a dream. But the boy wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to fix everything at once. He was simply showing up, one step at a time, 1 minute at a time. One morning, while cleaning the pocket watch with a soft cloth, the boy noticed the engraving on the back more clearly. The initials of his grandfather. He traced them slowly, feeling the weight of the man he never knew, the mistakes he never saw, the lessons passed down through silence and regret. It struck him then how strange it is that time doesn't just belong to the present. We carry pieces of other people's time inside us, their fears, their hopes, their unfinished stories. And sometimes we only realize it when something forces us to see it up close. He closed his hand around the watch and pressed it gently to his chest. He wasn't just holding an object. He was holding a history and a future he wasn't ready to run from anymore. Outside, his father was repairing part of the fence by the barn, a task the boy had avoided helping with for years. He stepped out of the house, the grass cool beneath his boots, the morning air alive with the smell of dew and soil. His father looked up, startled for just a second before masking it with a small nod. "Need a hand?" the boy asked. The father didn't smile, not fully, but something in his eyes softened, a kind of quiet relief, a recognition. "Yeah," he answered. "I could use one." They worked side by side. No speeches, no explanations, just movement, rhythm, the subtle language of two people trying, genuinely trying, to rebuild what was lost. By the time they finished, the sun was higher, and neither of them felt the urge to fill the silence. They had said what mattered already, not with words, but with presence. They walked back toward the house, the boy slightly behind, holding the pocket watch inside his jacket pocket, close to his heart. The ticking felt like a second pulse, steady, alive, reminding him that time wasn't an enemy. Time was an invitation. And you, you listening right now, can I tell you something? This story isn't just about a boy, a father, or an old watch. It's about you, your minutes, your hesitations, your later, your one day. Maybe there's something you've been avoiding. Maybe there's someone you need to talk to. Maybe there's a part of you that's been drifting through days without meaning. But you're still here. You still have time. And it doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It can start small, just like this boy, just like this moment. Thank you for staying until the end. Really, it means this story reached a place inside you that maybe needed to be touched. If you want to walk kama gente nessa jornada, there's another video waiting for you right here. Maybe it'll meet you exactly where you are. And remember, you're not running out of time. You're stepping into it.